So as you can see, a slight change in decor because we're gearing up for a panel. A big welcome back to Sonia, who will be our moderator today in a brilliant panel full of brilliant people. First of all, welcome Mirai Cheleng-Seraj. Do I pronounce it right? And also Dr. Lisa Precht. Hello, welcome. Unfortunately, you were promised Carmen Martinez today and also Masha Guermon Perez. They weren't able to make it, so this will have to make do. Sonia, the stage is yours.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And we have a special surprise for you. As per the two attendees who can't make it, Esha and I had a wonderful conversation last night, and she has plenty of thoughts on this topic. So, would you like to join us today? All right, yay. So hopefully everyone has some mental space from the long day to dive into this. This panel is going to be hopefully more on the fun and more practical side of how do we really make an awesome customer experience. You know, there's plenty of bots out there that you might not have really liked interacting with, or plenty of times where you kind of noticed something odd happen as you were in transition to it or from out of it. So what we're going to dive into today is some examples of what's happening right now, and also doing some brainstorming and blue sky thinking about what we think would be truly an ideal customer experience. So we have an awesome set of ladies on the panel today who can really speak on this topic. And I'd really like to start off by giving everyone the time and space to kind of explain where they are right now in their respective work. And from there, we'll build the discussion. So to each one of you, how do you use the conversational AI modality in your current customer experience? If you can just describe to the audience what that looks like right now for you, and we can all share that.
Then I can start. So my name is Mirai. Just first of all, I am also working at E.ON, the group E.ON, and we have currently 30 Conversational AI project realized, and there it looks completely different. So we have chatbots in place that answer just frequently asked questions and based on intents, and we have also transactional use cases to automate some processes. For example, when the end customers would like to submit a meter read, change the address, and we have also voice assistants in place where the user is also getting the support they need just to help themselves, for example, resetting passwords. So these are 3 of the examples I would like to share. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, I'm Lisa. So for IBM, of course, it matters what the solution is for, right? Who's going to use it, who's supposed to use it. So we really focus on the user need. I know that everyone says we're really user-centric, but we're really focusing on user research and also using the right methods to understand the problem. And since we also offer different solutions, right, we can really openly discuss, is conversational AI the right way to go? And then we'll have a look at, the right amount of proactivity within the dialogues, transparency, everything we're, I think, going to discuss in more detail, but we have chatbot solutions, voice bot solutions, multimodality approaches, so everything you can think of really.
Sure. And I think that the way that my clients, which are Bolocom and Independer, use their chatbot modality is in line with Lisa and what Mirai say. It's very text-based, and we'd like to move into more image-based. The medium is still a chatbot on a website or in an app, but we see that people require even more video and even GIFs or GIFs, whatever you pronounce it. But we see in the Netherlands that people are very aimed towards that text, and we'd like to take them away from them. But we cannot do that if it's not in line with the ideal customer journey. But this is something that we would all like to experiment on.
That's great. Thank you guys. Thank you, ladies, for those overviews. Mirai, you mentioned a load of use cases that you work on. Can you walk us through one of those and really paint what that experience looks like end to end?
Yes, sure. One of the projects I'm working currently heavily on is our internal IT bot. So we have at E.ON, as I said, 80K employees, and they have all different questions. We have all different subsidiaries and also different languages. And what we have implemented last year is our chatbot, friendly chatbot Jane. She's available on Teams, for example. And there the user can just select one of the topics we offer. And then the user journey starts like with one problem, of course. They have any IT issue. And they, in the best case, they don't call the service desk, but they know Jane exists. So they just enter Teams and start the chat. And then, then we have different opportunities to help the customer. So one of them would be just to give us step-by-step guidance. For example, how can I find the manual to download Adobe, for example. And we have also in some cases, videos in place. They can just watch a video or they see some screenshots and so on. And if that's not helps, then they can always be connected to a real agent. And this is just one example how we implement it. We have also, in the same department, the voice bot. And in the voice bot, they call the service desk number, but in the menu, they have already the opportunity to select, for example, I want to reset my password. And then it just takes 2 minutes from the call until they have a new password. And just with the help of Conversational AI, speech recognition, and these are one of the examples.
That's great, thank you. One of the things that comes to mind as you're speaking is oftentimes I feel like different departments at companies will be working in silos on different projects that actually end up, from the customer point of view, being the same experience. So I know, Esha, we were talking a bit about this last night. Can you explain, what's happening at Crossphrase, and what is the customer journey like there, and where would you like to see it go?
So for clarification, Crossphrase is a secondment agency, so we have all types of clients that all work on that ultimate customer experience. I'm actually saying a little bit about this tomorrow, so come see me tomorrow. The thing is that as content managers or web editors or conversational design folk, we are so focused on what we do and what we do ourselves and what we do to better our product that we don't really interact with the silos that are working besides us. For example, marketing, or what about PR or online communications in general. We are all focused on that end client, and we want to make that customer journey as special as possible, but we're never really talking to each other like, hey, what is you are doing, and what is it what I am doing? How can we break that wall that's between us and make it this communal us, this togetherness that we're doing? And at Crossphrase, we, as content specialists, we try to break that wall to communicate with everyone in the company, not only Crossphrase, but also the clients that we work for, to provide their optimal customer experience. And it's not easy because you have people that you're dealing with, not only your end customer, but also the clients that you work for, and they don't always see it that way.
Does this resonate with you, Lisa, as far as how things work at IBM, which is so long established?
Yeah, absolutely. We have many experts, but they are very scattered over the company. But of course, thankfully, IBM is a very, open-minded and collaborative company, which isn't always the case when you look at large companies. So I'm actually doing a lot of work to try to establish communities, like also squads, really looking at things end to end, really trying to really benefit the clients and to avoid that they have different touch points, and that is a bit weird and frustrating in the end, because what you already described, for them it should be a seamless and really good beneficial experience. So we're really working on making this happen.
What are some of the best practices you all use, or do you have like some blueprint or a set of protocols to help establish this at IBM?
You mean when it comes to really creating the solution for the end user in the end? So what I have established is like a design thinking template. So we use design thinking methods a lot in order to understand, okay, what is a problem? What do we want to achieve? How can we make sure that like one solution is more beneficial than the other? Once we decided conversational AI is a way to go, We use specific methods in order to really understand how to move forward and to really create together, like with all the necessary departments. Ideally, we all like pull them into one workshop where we really invest a lot of time to come up with the first solutions. And like when we invested this time and pulled everything in there enough, then usually we have enough information to move forward iteratively, validating and improving for the end users.
Wow, that's great. That sounds like it would be a great way of going about it, because you're starting with everybody in the room first instead of going backwards and trying to recreate, which sometimes happens as well. What are some of the biggest mistakes companies make when they're starting off, you know, trying to create some form of conversational AI, whether it's via voice or chat? What are some pitfalls you all have noticed, and what do you think would be a better methodology of making sure the customer comes first?
In my experience, what we just experience sometimes is the expectation, for example, for voice bots and chatbots, that there is an expectation the voice bot can be the same like a chatbot, and also to create the use cases in this form. And then what we try out is just to change this understanding and say, okay, there is another use case, maybe properly better, suitable, and yeah, just to consult them in these kind of things. Yeah.
I think, like you just mentioned, right, not having the right people in the room in the beginning. I mean, large companies often are political systems, so this is risky because you risk doing work other departments then will neglect and not move forward with. And then I think, like our former speaker already mentioned many things, right, to high expectations, wrong expectations. And then myself being a psychologist, what I see often is that we are aware of some best practices and how this is going to affect end users psychologically, but we ignore it, or we underestimate how strong the effects are. So, for example, the tendency to make experiences extremely human-like can be a risky move.
Going forth on that, I think that the problem is maybe threefold. First of all, I think that companies need to be really clear about what they want to put out. So what is the information that we want to push to the user? And secondly, what is it that we want to get out of it? Because we can start with FAQs, put it live, and then it's like, okay, our bot project has been successful, right? But if there are no clear goals or requirements or achievements to be met or to be measured, then what is it that you're actually doing with your chatbot? So first, what are you putting out to the customer? What are you getting out of it? But also, and this is brilliant that Lisa said it with the design thinking, first take a step back, look at your team. Because a company can think we have to do something with conversational AI, and oh, I know a conversation designer, and oh, I know a product owner, and kablam, we have a team. But what are the actual roles in that team? Like, who is the conversational copywriting's rockstar, and who is the one that likes the complex puzzles? Look at your team first before you actually start designing for your customers, please.
That's a great point, and I'm sure many people in the room have experienced or seen a situation where there was this desire to create a chatbot or a bot, and there wasn't really like a reason for it, and then it ends up costing more because you have to go backwards at the end to be like, wait, why are we doing this again? So that's a really great point. I think one thing that I'd love to touch on is, you know, we're creating a lot of the use cases involve somebody who is external using the bot, having an experience with it. But so often we design the bot with the business case in mind without really thinking about what works for the customer. In your experiences, have there been moments where you've been an advocate for that customer point of view, or how do you bring that in so that, again, not having to go backwards and realize, you know, nobody's really using this, or this experience is failing, and we're not actually, you know, cutting costs to the call center because this isn't working. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that for everybody.
In my first days or months as a conversation designer, I was like, I'm putting this information out to the customer, and they will just have to do with this. And why is this flow not working? Why are people dropping out? Why is my NPS dropping? And I thought that I was the messiah with the information that they needed, and then we got to actual user testing. And Grant said it this morning that we do not test enough, whether it be regression testing, but also purely customer testing. What is it that your customers actually think of the things that you created? And after a couple of months as a conversation designer, we started actually customer testing, and the end user, the consumer, came back with such a things that I would have never thought of, because I am so biased. I am still so biased. So the biggest lesson there is never presume to think that you know what your customer is feeling or thinking at all.
Maybe just to follow up on that before we keep going, because it's so interesting. Can you give us what was the most surprising thing you found?
I think that the most surprising thing, I don't find it surprising anymore, but the most surprising thing then is that people really wanted to have their feeling acknowledged. I think it was with Adidas back then, and the biggest flow there was, where's my order? Because everybody wants to know where their shoes are. And we could give them 100 explanations why their shoes weren't there. There is a strike, the bad weather, we were out of stock. But that didn't actually matter. What they wanted to hear was, sorry that we don't have your shoes ready for you, because we know you're excited. How can I make this feeling better? How can I make this go away? That is what they needed, and that was what we weren't giving them.
That's interesting. Very interesting, yeah.
In addition to everything you just said, I also tend to insist, like when I work with clients and workshops, that the end user is part of it, right? At least in the start. I know this is often hard, but it's impossible to design a solution for someone who isn't in the room. It's just kind of guessing, and if the client says this is too difficult, or we don't have the time or the resources, I will explain to them that we risk that nobody's going to use it, right? We invest a lot of time, we invest money, but nobody, right, wants it in the end, or it's not useful, it's not helpful, because we're kind of guessing. And then in addition, what I use heavily is current research, like existing data, right? We can generalize. There's so much research going on in this field. I feel like researchers find really interesting new things about how to increase trust in assistants, how to design for productivity within a dialogue. Like every day, and we can learn so much from it, and it's nice to, to use it to be less just about your own opinion and experience, but to be backed up by data.
And did you find anything surprising when you were interacting with the users?
Not really super surprising, but I became more sure that the results are really designed in a way that it's more helpful. I would say in research, the most surprising or difficult thing is that the experience needs to be really natural, and people really appreciate humor, when it fits. They really appreciate empathy, right, when it fits again. But when it becomes too human, when we go too far, when we take the wrong approach in the wrong use case, this burns and flames really quickly. So I think this is what's still really interesting and where we will still have to learn a lot.
Yeah, that is interesting, because I think our patience levels are different when it comes to bots than it would be with a normal human being. And I think there were a few talks today that highlighted that, but we want it to be human-like, but we have different expectations, and when it doesn't work, maybe it's frustrating in a different kind of a way. What about you, Mirai?
When I just started, what I found surprising is we had one project, I guess. There was the NPS scores not much high, and there we just changed a small thing, and was just that the user feels helped in the end. It was just okay, I can't maybe not help you with this topic, but would you like to leave a message, and our colleagues will come back to you, and these kind of stuff. So that was made already a big mistake, because the user was leaving the chat, for example, with a concrete solution. And when it comes, that's one of the points.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
A few of you mentioned NPS. Is that a metric that you're tying with just the chatbot, or is that sort of the end experience if they've had contact with a human being. How do you all measure NPS?
For me, it's a special case. For ball.com, we have this complete experience. So it's not only measured for the chatbot only, but also for the contact with the live agent and also for the experience on the website itself. So the data on that is not really clear because it's not solely for the chatbot. Anything to say about that? No.
We have always the feedback in the end of the chat, where we also ask them how they would rate the experience and so on, and based on the feedback we just then get the result, how successful it was, and when we have live chat changes at the same time, and also how much is the rate for forwarding them to the human agent, and this gives us also a good hint in if there are some room for improvements in the content, and yeah.
So when it comes to the digital assistant, I don't have a general approach because I feel it's really difficult, depending on how the conversation went and depending on the use case, right? I often see you gave the wrong response and then you're like, was that helpful, right? So it's hard to find the right place and way in asking for feedback. So this is why we kind of always look, how did the conversation go and what's the right approach to ask for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the thing I think about NPS is that if the customer has had a bad experience, it doesn't really matter if that's with the bot. If they are here to check where their order is and the order hasn't arrived yet, they will leave that bot with a negative feeling, and they're much more certain to leave a bad score for your chatbot. So NPS or CSAT is not really a positive thing to measure. At least I don't think so. It's not fair for the hard work that we put in, because if the customer's had a bad experience, not necessarily bound to the chatbot, that measurement will just go down and down.
Right. Yeah. It's a hard thing to get the right measurements. I mean, are there any measures that you use that do work well, or what is the measure for? Oh, I know the chatbot is working well.
Well, I really resonate with what I just said. Just actually ask people for, hey, what did go wrong? What is your feedback? What can we improve on outside of the issues that you had? Just taking it back to the chatbot or the contact with the live agent. What do you want us to improve? So I really agree with that. Yeah.
Sorry. But I want to say what we also do is to check the conversations, and that just to see how the transcripts look like. I think that's also helpful, because there we can see real user data, what the user already just replied to the chat, because I think they don't, some of them don't expect that we read all the messages, so we don't read all, but some of them, and there you can get really good feedback about what's working well and what's not.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a mixture, right? Asking people, but this will always be confounded with their frustration they might have, or if they have a good day, or what they think in general about chatbots, right? And then just having a look at where do they leave the path, right? Where will they leave the conversation and didn't finish it? I feel like this is really helpful information.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a difficult thing to measure with hard data. And we have NPS as well, and it gets bundled into this big thing of the overall score, but the experiences for each modality is so different, so it's hard to take action items from it and be like, okay, this is what we need to improve upon. At the same time, transcript reading is really time-consuming, and it doesn't really provide sort of a number or a score at the end. It is much more feeling-based. So I'll be interested to see as we evolve what are some of the sentimental scores that we come up with, or ways of measuring that that perhaps are more automated, but is interesting to hear where everyone is. What would you want to make sure this audience walks away with when they're thinking about going back and developing, great customer experiences from learnings that you've had that maybe surprised you or you weren't expecting, that you'd like to share with everyone?
So for us, or for me, the most important part in the beginning is just to set the expectations. So what should the project do? and then also to get the right people into the topic. For example, we had the case where we need some real users and customers there, but if you don't have them, then, for example, we have colleagues who are maintaining the websites, the custom agents, and so on, to keep also their feedbacks helps a lot. So just right at the beginning, and also to make sure how we set if the project was successful or not. So as we said, we have different KPIs in place, but also then to think about potential other use cases. So these kind of.
I think that's a really good point. And you kind of triggered me because we work at companies where there work hundreds of people, and a lot of them are actual knowledge owners. And instead of just asking them for input for your chatbot, actually actively bring them on board. Tell them what it is that you do, and tell them what your vision is, and that you would like that to become their vision also, so that it's more of a team effort instead of you working in, again, this silo.
Such a hard question. I feel like there are like a million things. I feel sometimes people forget that conversational AI, it's not an end in itself, and that it's ideally not a product, but a modality. And it needs to have like an added value compared to other modalities we have in place. And ideally, we have a look at everything holistically. So how can, you know, this conversational aspect benefit the end user, and how can we combine it with direct touch or whatever is available and makes sense for the product, makes sense for different even disabilities, right? If you maybe can't use hands or you can't see, right? And then like how is this helpful again for different situations, different contexts where you may be not able to use your hands even though you have them, right? So, yeah.
That's interesting. At IBM, what are some of the points where conversational AI comes in and out of the customer journey? Can you share a little bit of where all you use it?
This is such a hard question. It's really different with every client. So sometimes it really is like adding value to like an existing experience. Sometimes it's about doing something completely new, or what we also already heard today, often we try to help people in their work by augmenting their abilities with, for example, a hidden assistant, which is listening in on a conversation between two people, offering content, offering guidance, just helping the person in their work. So it really depends on like all the different situations we have in companies, right?
That's interesting. I think we've talked a lot about like what are the possibilities of applying conversational AI. I think that the other area to consider is, this happens to me personally all the time, where people from different teams all over the company will ask, oh, let's use a bot for that, let's use a bot for that. Like it's like the bot's a solution for everything. And as we all know, that's not necessarily the case. So what are some situations where you've learned in your career, no, this is not for conversational AI?
So I think one thing which is tempting but also a bit risky when we talk about the mindset or the expectations of the user is combining the search with a digital assistant. It can be great, it has a lot of potential, but of course people are writing differently when they expect to enter a search, and I see that more and more clients are considering like throwing it all in there. So we need to be really cautious, like in general, okay, what is the expectation when you use a certain user interface, which has traditionally like a different use? So this is an example, yeah, where I'm a bit cautious.
Yeah. By the way, do we take questions from the audience already or not?
We have not, but we can do that after.
Whatever you like. You're the
Be
moderator.
ready.
But the question was, when do we say no to people coming in? Yeah, let's use the chatbot for that. Yeah. We usually say, let the data speak for itself. So we read the conversations, we check what is actual useful information for the chatbots. But when marketing comes into us, or someone else from the company comes into us and say, let's put this in the chatbot, I will say to them, have you checked if this is actually useful for the customer? And they will say, no, but we want this to be put out to them. And of course, we all work in sprints, we work agile, and if there's just simply no room, I just go back to them and say, please prove to me that this is something that the customer actually wants to know, and otherwise I will not have time for it. So it is up to us to stand up and say, no thank you, to those people that come to us and say, oh, this is the chatbot, we can use the chatbot for anything. No, we cannot.
I have 2 examples in my mind. One is like when the content is really changing a lot and when the team does not have time to really maintain the bot. For example, some reportings, etc. There, I think it's very difficult. The second thing what we have also faced is when we have user with normal energy contract, and for example, they say something like, "I want to change my address because my wife passed away or something." Just not stop the conversation there with the bot and bring there the human agent in. So this is also one. I would say 2 of our limitations in this case.
Maybe just in addition, I think it will also depend, are we talking about a chatbot or a voice bot, right? When it comes to voice, I usually ask people, would you do this like via voice, right, via language with another person? There are just some use cases which are really annoying to do via voice. So always asking the client or colleagues, like, do you think this is the most easiest way to do it, right?
Yeah, right. I think one thing that is really helpful is just the number of steps. Is this so complicated that it's going to be a nuisance to go through? And I feel like oftentimes those are the cases where we see a lot of people dropping off the path, like, this is too much, and then having a repeat contact via voice or whatnot. Did you want to add something?
I saw a hand in the audience, I think.
Yeah. So we can move to questions from the audience.
If you want to, but...
Yeah. No, that was on my mind. So yeah, let's do it.
Here in the front.
Yeah, my question was from something that was like back in the conversation now. But I was wondering, like, you're talking about feedback as something that's valuable to us as designers of the bot, but don't you think that maybe feedback could be also valuable to the customer themselves to, I don't know, have the feeling to be heard or something? Like, for example, you have like a bad or a medium experience, and then you get to like give stars, but then you also get to like tell, I don't know, whatever you thought of the bot. And do you think we could maybe not just do this at the end, but like find a way to somehow do this in the middle of a conversation? Or is that too much, do you think?
I thought your question went the actual other way. So when a customer gives feedback or a number of stars that are in compliant with NPS, so 2, 3 stars, that we get back to them saying, hey, I'm sorry that you had this experience. What can we do better for you? So that we get feedback on the feedback. But that wasn't what you meant.
No, it wasn't what I meant. Would be nice, though.
Yeah.
If you would do it in the middle of the conversation, that would actually be something you could do, but that would be very difficult. But personally, when I'm frustrated with something, I just want for them to understand what's wrong with them. And just giving stars doesn't seem enough sometimes.
I think it really depends on the bot, right? It really depends on the use case and on the character the bot has too. I think in general we just love, right, getting it out, like when we're frustrated. So this can be helpful by itself for sure. And then, for example, when you look at, like, there are some really good chatbots around mental health, and they have, of course, a different way in conversing. And there, it would make a lot of sense doing this a lot. To be really cautious because it's like a really serious topic. And then when you have to go through like a longer process, as an end user, that makes sense too, to make sure we don't lose like the user within, right? To try to repair before we reach the end and really frustrate. But it will always be, depending on the situation. If it's just about, getting a global feedback, without helping the user within the conversation, I think they will be annoyed by it.
maybe.
What we are currently looking into, it came up last week, so the question's perfect. For one project, we are now looking into how we can implement the microfeedback for each answer, and then how we can see it in the dashboard afterwards. So maybe in 2-3 months I can tell you more about this, but this is also a question that came up from one of our customers. Yeah.
I mean with the...
Thumbs up, thumbs down, yeah.
Okay.
That's just to see if we can get some more details about each answer from the bot, and that can also give us some hint. Maybe maybe the topic was right, but the chat reply was not helpful enough. So that maybe can help us.
Okay.
Maybe just to add, like, real quick, I feel often, ever so often, we should ask ourselves, how would we perceive this if like an actual human being would do this with us? If I would talk to you and like every other sentence, I'm like, how was that for you, right? Like, what do you think? This gets super annoying really, really quickly. But there are many conversations and situations where it makes sense. So if you ask yourself, how would I feel if somebody would do this with me as a person? This is often a really helpful thought process.
You could like not pose it as a feedback question, but just, I don't know, give them the chance to give feedback without actually asking. Maybe I'm not going too difficult.
Yeah, that's a really good thought, yeah.
I think we have a few more questions
let's
around
go.
here.
Got the microphone here because I had my hand up.
Yes.
I was very pleased to hear somebody mention testing, regression testing, performance testing. I think there's two sides to it, and I hope you'd agree with that, but I'd be interested in your views on both sides. First of all, this is software, right? So how do you want to test the fact, test whether, not the fact, test whether your design that you have carefully built has actually been implemented correctly and is actually being delivered correctly and is functioning as you expect it to, because there's a software component behind the design. That's one side of the testing, and a lot of that could be automated. And the other side is then, how much do you want to use, as we say in our business, use your customers as crash test dummies and get them to tell you what's wrong with it, and how much do you want to find out before you launch it what's wrong with the solution, whether it's going to work with real customers. So use focus groups or use sophisticated test cases to make sure that you're actually testing the user experience.
Ideally, we'd have the user testing before anything goes live, right? But let's be honest, who here actually does that 100% of the time? I see no hands. Oh, I saw one hand. No, we don't. No, we need to do that more. Actually, user testing, focus groups, or interviews, or anything else that helps us understand what the customer actually thinks of it, and use them as the crash test dummies instead of the real big audience. It doesn't happen enough. It should happen more for everyone. And then the other question about regression testing, I think that's another topic altogether, but we fully automated that. I'm not sure how they do that at E.ON or at IBM. Maybe you want to tell something about that, or not?
No, we do try to do it. It will depend on the client if like we can get access to real end users, right? Like before I worked for IBM, I worked at BMW, and I was responsible for the voice control in the vehicles. And what I would do there was like test hypotheses like heavily with crowdsourcing studies. And this is something I found very helpful because like while designing, I could, for different markets, do some research, what kind of information is more important, like what is more helpful. And this was really helping like without heavy user testing. Before you even have a dialogue, you can test, right? To understand, am I taking the right approach here? Is this really going to be helpful? And is this like similarly helpful in Italy compared to the US, compared to North Korea? Like North Korea is not a great example. South Korea though.
Yeah, I think you mentioned already most, but what we also do, of course, is to have the internal testing, the business testing, then the friendly user testing. So just to choose a few people which are not working with the bot project and to give them just a short overview about what the project is, but not too much detail so that they can have just test with a view as end customer. I think that's also valuable. And then when the bot project is live, to avoid the crash testing, to have a specific period where you really go into every conversation to see where maybe something went wrong than you would only planned before, and then just to do the improvements right in the beginning.
See a hand over there, then a hand over here.
I also got the microphone. So I thought it was a really good point that you just mentioned, from about getting feedback during the dialogue, and I think what Lisa said was also very nice in terms of saying, like, let's try to see, well, what do we do, when we are in a conversation, we try to feel our conversational partner, right? And technology is now at the point where we can use emotion detection, for example, to understand in the course of a dialogue, well, is it going up in terms of the emotion, or is it going downways, And at certain points when we use that, we can actually react to it, right? We can proactively ask a question and get, I agree with you, very, very valuable feedback, right? Because if you can ask an open-ended question, you will learn so much about your customers, right? And I think, before we talked about, well, what are the limitations of conversational interfaces, I think this is one of the big upsides, right? A visual interface only lets you operate in the basically limitations that you give to a user, like you have 3 options, you can choose amongst these 3 options, for example. But a true open question lets you find out how exactly a customer is feeling at that point. This gives you such deep insights. That's why I say, like, conversational data, if they are collected responsibly and used responsibly, are really, the gold standard of our age. So it's just a comment, like.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. It's absolutely true.
I really agree. So I think what you just said, like, also relates to another point we were discussing earlier, like, what do we see with clients, or like in the field, what is not great yet, or what is underestimated. And I feel like making the most out of the strength of conversational AI, which is asking the right questions, which right, ChatGPT can't do, right? Taking the user by the hand, really tailoring the conversation to their situation, their needs, and coming up with personalized, right, not to the person, but to their needs and their situation, solution and action options. This is something which isn't happening enough, I think, because we often focus too much, like, on a really narrow, happy path. But yeah, by asking the right questions and, like, really making the most out of the modality, like, this is really the way to go, yeah.
Hi, hello. I will come back to feedback, the user feedback. You talked about NPS and ways to get the feedback, because you're getting the data, you're building a model, a design, and then afterwards in production you try to understand if this works. So we need this feedback. And asking question every time a self-service is finished, yeah, it might be a solution. But have you, from your experience, have you used sentiment analysis or emotion detection as another way of getting the feedback while you are talking with a customer? And in 2 ways, to get the user feedback first from, sentiment analysis and emotion detection is something that we're having as a technologies, use them in 2 ways to get the user feedback. If this is a happy path or a non-happy path, he is a happy customer or not. And secondly, if the feedback from the sentiment analysis, for example, if the customer is angry, if you have used to change the conversation design depending on the mood of the customer, so have different prompts for angry customers or happy customers, etc.
So I know this is really, really tempting. And you asked different things, right? So, like, regarding the feedback, I feel like this is not the best, not the most valid approach, because we never really know where is the emotion coming from. Like, why is this person in this mood? Is this related to their day, right? Is this related to the issue, why they're, like, in this process right now, we talked about earlier, right? Is this because they're really annoyed by the bot? Or is this person just writing in this way, right? And like I personally did a lot of research where we tried to adapt the responses to the emotion of the user. And this is something we found for like other personality traits too. I feel it's a bit risky. We should always like really try to understand the problem and try to be really efficient in solving it independent of these other variables, because what can happen is, or what we often found in studies, if everything goes right and you get it like perfectly right, it's a bit more positive, like compared to treating it neutrally. But ever so often, the effect was negative. So like if you get something wrong, and this happens pretty quickly, you can create like a very negative effect. So I often feel like we should just try to help the person, just try to solve the problem really, really quickly, independent of their mood, right? And this will always be the best solution for the end user.
I just want to point out that we're kind of in the end phase of our panel here. I think we have about 3 to 4 minutes left. So I know there are a couple of questions back in the room, but I mainly want to give the word to you, back to our moderator.
Oh, yeah. Well, if we're wrapping up, I did have one question I wanted to kind of leave the room with, and to kind of do a little bit of blue sky thinking. So, whether at your respective companies or in an example of what you've experienced with the bot in your personal lives, I would love to learn. Can you paint a picture of an ideal customer experience, technical limitations aside? You know, just what would that look like? If you can share that, that'd be great.
It's go big or go home, right?
Go big or go
Okay.
home, yes.
I've been thinking about this concept of combining LLMs with large data sets that tell you everything about who you are, what is your online behavior, what kind of shoes do you like, what kind of speech do you like, what kind of music do you like, and add that to a conversational interface. And then as a customer, you would be spoken to in exactly the way you would want to be spoken to. This would mean the death of tone of voice for a company, because everything that they would put out will be in exactly the tone of voice that the customer wants to hear. So I think that is a future I'd be very excited about. And I'm not sure if we're going to see this in the coming 5 years, but I hope we will see it in our lifetime.
So my ideal solution would be conversational, but wouldn't pretend to be a human. Like it would use the proper amount of reactivity, but also of proactivity. And it would allow me, like depending on different contexts and situations, to use different modalities to interact with it. So do you all know Jarvis from Iron Man? Right? It's a conversational assistant, and it's really powerful and intelligent, but never going too far. So I feel like this would be something kind of need to have, yeah.
So my thoughts on this, it's a bit similar. So I talked about this also with a colleague, and she had a nice phrase, like the marriage between generative AI and conversational AI. So I think that's also a nice thing, because there we would have the conversation AI as like a moderator as you are here right now, and then also to give the user the opportunity to also ask more questions about the hobbies and so on, and also maybe to create then a next step immersive experience, like where all of these meet together in the metaverse. So that's really big, but we will see.
Yeah, that'll have to be a whole different panel on the metaverse. So thank you, ladies, so much. I hope everyone enjoyed that conversation. And continue with questions here, but we won't stop you and get in between you and your coffee break, so please feel free to move around.
I was just going to ask, I guess I'll keep my question to the point. how do any of you use user personas to ensure like empathy and user centricity when designing? Because I guess it's not necessarily always possible to do co-creation sessions for every journey you're going to build with users, and you may not have feedback on something that hasn't yet been developed. So how do you use personas?
So we use it right in the beginning of each project, so that's always apart from our workshop with the client. Just it helps us also to get more concrete details on how the solution in the end should look like. And they have like a small sheet, they should take it home as a homework, make some thoughts about how the persona should look like, also keep in mind how the overall employer brand looks like, for example. It should also fit to the brand and all. And then we also ask how should your bot look like? So would you like to have an avatar? Should it something like more really robotic, or like in human, what you have just showed in your introduction, in your speech today? And that's part of our whole conversational project management then, yeah.
I think there's also a value for brand, like the company you're working for and the brand that's intended to be carried out, and finding a persona that fits into that. Like, for example, at GoDaddy, we have a very great customer support team, has won many awards, and the brand also has a bit of a very fun, friendly vibe to it. So it's something we've been thinking about as far as, you know, what's a character that emulates that trait of that customer support team that's working at a high level, and the tone they carry, and the feeling people feel when they enter the website. Because again, going to sort of the end-to-end journey, from the customer point of view, it should mesh in to the experience that they're having, and it shouldn't be like, whoa, you know, where's this dinosaur coming from at this beauty cosmetics company, right? So
Yeah.
I think it matters on the brands.
Definitely agree. And I think in terms of like the bot persona, that's something that we're looking into. Lorraine, who's a conversation designer, we're exploring all of that. But I guess where I was coming from was more so like user personas. So how do you group your users based on their needs and goals, and then how do you use them to design features and flows?
So I'm not a huge user persona fan, but it will depend on what you mean, right? So I do like a user persona with the end users, but based on their goals, their needs, their tasks, and their pains. To be really, really user goal centered. What I try to avoid to do is this is Aunt Frida, she is 56, like, right? I know that people love that, but what does it really mean? And does she not have the same goals maybe than another person? So I try to do this and to use personas, but I will, you know, try to look at their goals, at their needs, and try to really tailor to this and not to their personalities.
I think that, thank you all for your questions. We'll be around if you would like to have more.